I'm going to invite us to begin by doing a form of mindfulness meditation very briefly, which some of you are familiar with. So as you've probably guessed, I'm a meditation teacher. I teach both Buddhist and secular mindfulness meditation, and my experience includes both a monastic practice in North America, in Asia, as well as lay or householder practice. We're both parents, and that's a big part of our practice as well. So just a very brief meditation. This is called the body scan. And when you're doing the body scan, you can actually take any position that you like. You're invited to be at ease. You can do this really quickly as long as you maintain alertness. Like if you're standing in line at Trader Joe's, you might want to do a quick body scan with your eyes open. Again, we're appropriately aware of our surroundings. This is not, meditation is not about floating off, at least not this kind of meditation. It's kind of the opposite. We're really on Earth. We're creatures on Earth, and we're alert to what's happening. And you can do it at more length than just Google body scan. Google is your friend if you don't know the body scan. There are many, many versions online. So just quickly finding a position that feels stable and comfortable enough. Closing the eyes or keeping them open just a little, whichever is more relaxing for you. The attention is inward. And breathing normally, or maybe taking a couple of deep breaths. Just allow your mindful awareness. Mindful awareness means we're trying not to judge anything. We're looking without judging. We're looking to see what's there. Very, very simply. So we're scanning throughout the body. Just do it any way you like, and notice any places in the body that feel tight or tense or sore, or loose and open and easy, or maybe neither. Where in the body might you feel heaviness, lightness, expansion, contraction, tingling? So just being invited, physical sensations. If there are ones that are really unpleasant to you, direct your attention elsewhere. Just lightly scanning around. I'm in my forehead right now. I feel my feet. Feel what you feel and notice. So the key words of mindfulness are notice and observe. And opening the eyes gently. So that's really something that's beneficial to do almost any time and anywhere throughout the day. You can do it more quickly. Again, you can take more time with it. People who are really well grounded in their bodies are probably always scanning in some way, because it's through that awareness that then we can make it could even be what my yoga teacher calls micro movements or micro adjustments. It could be noticing, oh, my knees are locked. I'm just going to do a little micro bend, and then I'm feeling a little more grounded. I'm feeling a little more flexible here. Or maybe I want to stand upright more. Notice, hey, are my shoulders forward or are they back? And again, this can be done throughout the day. So creating more space in the body through a meditative movement practice like yoga, 5 realms movement, Tai Chi, Qigong, all of which are taught here at East Bay Meditation, or through getting body work done by someone who's qualified and trustworthy, is one of the best gifts that we can give ourselves, in my opinion. Because all of these practices help us to create more space in our bodies, and that's, as we know, if we're yoga students, which I am, that can literally mean more space. People who do yoga regularly and just do like some really nice upward stretching they've been measured after yoga, and you actually can gain. You actually are taller because the space between, there's more space between the vertebrae. So this is not just conceptual. It's actually we can create literally more space, also emotionally and spiritually more space within our bodies through these meditative movements. And when we create more space in our bodies, so here's the formula, create more space in body equals creating more space in our lives. It's a direct correlation. When we create more space in the body, we create more space in our life. So that's why the movement that we're learning here, I feel, is so important. It's so beneficial. And being grounded in our body, being embodied in our ground of being, in other words, knowing who we are, what we stand for, and who we stand with, allows us also to stand up for a more spacious life and to, you probably have seen this if you're on social media, hashtag reclaim our time, or hashtag reclaiming my time. Contemporary life, if you're like me, is full of stressors. There's sometimes intense multitasking that needs to be done. Sometimes it doesn't need to be done, and I'm doing it anyway. I mean, I can literally be walking around my apartment while brushing my teeth, while listening to the voicemail that's been left on my landline phone. So I'm doing 3 things at once. I'm not doing any of them very well or fully. And sometimes kind of we need to do that. We're pressed for time. Other times I might ask myself, do I really need to do that? I do want to get a good dental checkup. Maybe I should just stop and pay more attention to how I'm brushing my teeth, which does matter. So a recent concrete and now famous example picked up as a feminist meme online, hashtag reclaiming my time. How many of you have heard of that hashtag? Yeah, okay, so that, as you know or might not know, is from Representative Maxine Waters, sometimes referred to in the media as Auntie or Auntie Maxine Waters, Democrat California, saying over and over, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time, very politely and firmly, in an exchange with Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in a House Financial Services Committee hearing. So what happened was that Mnuchin just kept droning on in a seemingly complimentary manner, taking up all her damn time. And she stood up for herself and she made some space for herself, very nicely too, saying, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time. And I've seen this picked up by people saying, yeah, I don't want to be a victim to multitasking and feeling like I'm always on the run and my time is always filled up. Hey, how about space? How about emptying out? How about reclaiming my life, my space, my time? So another example that I'd like to point to, this is specific to this time and this place, and that's, as many of us are aware, there were protests and counter-protests and counter-protests and some clashes in Berkeley, not so much I think in San Francisco very recently, in which groups of white supremacists did appear. Then there was very intense counter-protesting. And one of the community teachers here, who's a really, really wonderful spiritual leader, Rabbi Diane Elliott, emailed me that for that action in Berkeley, she was with a group at the First Congregational Church in Berkeley who deliberately stayed behind to hold space. So once again, creating space, holding space, reclaiming space, being grounded, being centered, being calm, to be kind of a steady anchor space for the community. And so she and a group of people stayed behind and meditated in the church. while others marched to Berkeley City Hall. And Rabbi Diane said this, "I know that many of us were torn about not marching. As we sat, shining the light of awareness upon whatever guilt, shame, aversion, and sadness might have been present, we were engaging in the essential work of, I don't know how to pronounce this, I believe it's Hebrew Haknaha, Hakhna', which he said means surrender. Purifying consciousness, softening our egos, and becoming more empty." So instead of filling up our time, we can ask ourselves, how can we empty our time occasionally? And my original teacher, I am originally trained in Zen Buddhism, so he was a Korean Zen monk. He used to say this, he used to say, in meditation, we enter timeless time. In meditation, we enter timeless time. So there's a lot of stress and anxiety and anger and reactivity in the air right now that I'm feeling, as well as incredible wisdom, innovation. Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Emergent Strategy, is being read widely in my circles. I'm reading it. So there are lots going on right now, and today we're reclaiming our time. We're creating more space in our bodies, and that will create more space in our lives. So the practice we're doing today in community, creating more space in our bodies through breath, through movement, in silence together, as well as in community using mindful speech, is hugely important. So let's just take a moment and create some space in our bodies using Master Ellis's 3 breaths, breathing in and out. Notice how you feel in body and mind. Breathing in and out. You can breathe out through your mouth if you like. And for the last one, when we breathe out, we can all say ah. Breathing in. Ah. That felt pretty good. Let's do it again. Breathing in. You can be loud. Ah. Oh, okay. By popular demand, one more. Breathing in. Let it out. Oh, that is great. Thank you. So, in my opinion, as a teacher of meditation, we need spaciousness. We need spaciousness in order to look closely. So, in other words, if I'm all fixated on this thing, am I seeing everything and everyone that's in this room? No. We might call it a form of concentration, but if it's fixation, and I'm here thinking, oh, I got to get this all nice, and so on and so forth. And meanwhile, there's a giant pile of garbage over there. I'm actually not acting appropriately. So we need spaciousness in order to look closely and be in touch with reality around us. And when we look closely, we gain insights. In other words, we see more of reality. So there may be forms, and many of them, of different kinds of meditation, which are all wonderful, in which we're communing with the divine and doing many, many wonderful spiritual things. In mindfulness meditation, and there is spiritual reality, of course, we are growing ever more observant, almost like reporters or scientists, to know, wow, I feel a little twinge in my back. So that's mindfulness. Noticing, observing, twinge, which means a little sharp sensation, like in a certain part of my body. So I'm getting in touch with reality. The interesting thing about mindful awareness is that as soon as we become aware, usually, very clearly when we see, as soon as we become aware through mindfulness, wisdom arises, and if we're giving ourselves more space, then I might think, oh, I could relieve that little twinge probably by maybe doing a little back bend quickly. I could be on the BART, could be at the airport, even in the car at a stoplight. Just taking a deep breath, letting it out. Then I use my mindfulness scan again. Does it feel a little better? Does it feel worse? Or does it feel the same? So we see more of reality and we respond with wisdom. When we see more of reality, we make wiser choices, and our actions proceed more from a place of wisdom rather than from reactivity or habit energy. The habit energy is very, very strong in most of our lives, and some of our habits are good habits. They are. It could be that we have a habit and we think, oh, all right, I'm going to go into the kitchen now and do some dishes. And then afterwards, we notice, yeah, it's really nice. The kitchen is clean, the dishes are clean. Yay for me. However, it may be that we just always wash dishes at a certain time of day, and so we go tumbling in there out of habit, when maybe we should be using that time. Little few dirty dishes, in my opinion, is not going to result in the end of the world. Maybe we use that time for a little mindful stretching, breathing 5 realms. I think Master Ellis, you once told me that to go through one round is 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So to do it 3 times?
Yes. Yeah.
The average is about 7 to 8 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, because I actually was in a kind of a speeded up place when we were talking about that, or we were in class, and I remember you said somewhat pointedly, do you have 7 minutes in your day? And I thought, fine, I do. I have to admit it. It's not that I don't have time. I do have time for this form. So that's a fairly simple formula I'll leave you with to consider. Space in the body creates more mental and emotional spaciousness so that wisdom can arise. Space in the body creates more mental and emotional spaciousness so that our natural wisdom can arise. Thank you very much.
So our 5 realms practice is one that actually came out of a mixture of things. So as I said before, I'm a practicing martial artist. I've been practicing for just reached my 32nd anniversary in martial arts in August. And about halfway through that time, I was injured. Not from martial arts practice, I'll say right away. But I tore my ACL. It's a common thing. ACLs, we find out, tend to be pretty somewhat fragile things. It's a very common kind of an injury. And this is the time of, there was such a thing as a pre-existing condition. We're going to deny you on that if you switch jobs, right? You don't want to pay for something you did, someone else had insurance coverage on you. And so it was actually a while before I was able to get it taken care of. And so in that time, my body really seized up because of that injury. It was over 1.5 years from the injury to when I had surgery. And I couldn't do the things that I was used to doing, the flipping and breaking boards and concrete and stuff and just flying all over the place. A lot of taekwondo, and there's a lot of jump kicks. So I spent a lot of time in the air. And so I was grounded, right? And I couldn't quite do the things that I was used to doing. And for those of you that have a vigorous exercise practice, you may, we know this from our science, we get used to the endorphin hits and used to the routines and just even habit energy of doing whatever it is we do. So I was really stuck in my habit energy of exercise, of feeling that particular kind of endorphin hit that I would get when I would exercise, just feeling good about it, feeling good about myself. I'm feeling really good about myself, right? I did so many hours, I could do so much with my body, feeling really good. Look at me. Look what I can do. And then I couldn't do it anymore. And constant pain with itself will bring a lot of emotional roller coasters for many people. And it was like that for me. But then coming out of that habit energy, not having that endorphin hit, not having that ego hit of doing what I was used to doing, was very difficult. It's part of the definition of who I was. And so it was masked by, I think, some of the pain of that I felt in my body prior to surgery, right after surgery. But then after a little while, I figured out that actually my pain, my anger, that I was sort of haplessly directing at the world, particularly my wife and children, that it really was something that I needed to sort of say to myself, oh, I'm angry because I couldn't do what I was doing before. And then that led me to the thought, oh, I'm actually angry at my body. I was angry at my body. That's where I was really sort of deep down placing some of my anger. And once I said, oh, well, that doesn't seem right, to be angry at my body for having this injury, then I decided to do what I had been telling lots of students to do for many years, what I've been telling you to do today, right? Advising, suggesting that you take care of your body's needs and just find out what your capacity is and have this communication, this communion with your body, right where you are today, in this moment, right? Not where I want to be, where I was, but where I am. And find some joy and value in that moment, right? And that's something that really connects with me and draws me to, although I'm not a formal Buddhist, but I've been in the Buddhist community for quite a long time, and that's something that draws me, is about the amount of time that we spend looking at what's happening in the present moment. And I really wanted to do that for my body. What's happening in the present moment? Not a goal that's far out. Not what I used to do before with my body, but where am I right now? So that led me to this 5 realms practice. I started cobbling together things that I had learned in martial arts practice and different martial arts practices, and my therapist had told me to do various things. A particular Tai Chi teacher that really was the inspiration and foundation for this practice. And I basically just built something for myself that helped me feel good, that helped me be in the moment. And it turned out to be the standing version of the 5 realms practice, right? And at the time, first I was in crutches and then I was using the cane. But when I developed it, when I first started doing it, I could only step this far. That was it. And then this far. I was doing it with a cane. And then as time went on, some months went on, I could go a little bit deeper. I gradually released the cane, but the pain was still there. And so I would even notice a difference in left side, right side, right? Because I had surgery on one side. And some days I would notice I could go a lot further, a lot deeper, and some days I couldn't. And so I had to be okay with this variation in my own body from the time of day. Like when I first woke up in the morning, it was really hard. My body's really stiff. Versus in the evening, when I moved around a bit during the day, I was a little bit looser. I was doing exercise and mainly based on therapy. And so I felt like at one point, all right, I'm starting to come back. Here I come. By this time I'm jogging, I'm running, get on the Stairmaster, I had to do that. They told me to get on the stationary bike, I do like 45 minutes on the bike. I get off, I'm like, okay, knee's okay. I don't feel like, all right, it feels good. Every now and then swell up a little bit, but I was like, okay, let's ice it. I'm coming back. And then at one time on vacation, I was sort of doing my normal routine, and my knee just was like, no, that's enough. and it swelled up. And then for like 3 weeks, couldn't do anything. So I'm back to a cane, right? And I noticed that frustration rising. Oh, how come I can't do it? Oh, I thought I was coming back. I thought I was getting better. So again, it's being right where I was, releasing I noticed all those rising expectations I had about, oh, I might be able to get back to where I was. And then again, thinking about being in the moment. So this is the genesis of 5 realms. I have a few friends here who know me from other spaces. The next significant thing for me that happened was that I was going to a men's meeting at a place called East Bay Church. It's led for a long time by Reverend E. She's retired now, but at the time, I was going to sit for a men's meeting, which was going to last 2, maybe 2.5 hours. And sitting in this position was really hard. And so I was doing my 5 realms before this meeting. I got there early in the sanctuary. Reverend E's walking through. She sees me. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I told her and showed her. And she's like, "Oh, you need to show other people." And I hadn't thought about it as something I thought it was medicine just for me. And she encouraged, she's like, no, you need to show everybody this. So there I started showing folks. My association with Mushim, she essentially did the same thing here. And she saw me do it, a little bit of it on a Friday. She's like, "Oh, come more, this community really could use more movement." And she's done a lot with myself and others as well to encourage more movement in this community. And so through these 2 places, they really have been like, I sometimes call them my laboratories to develop this practice. And so then the sitting version was developed, the reclining version was developed, and there's some other ways to practice it. We can't get into all of it today, but I'm going to give you an idea too that you can explore at home. Later on, I'll give you an idea about how we use those same movements and explore them in different ways. But there's this other component to it. This other component, right? So it is being able to understand that the movements themselves help lead us in how we live our lives and how we walk through the world. If it is true, and maybe for most people, maybe not all, but for many people, find that their state of mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, will lead your body in some way or another. I'm happy, my body's light. I'm upset, my body's hot. I'm solemn, my body's heavy. There's Bruce Lee who said a certain posture strikes a resonant chord in our spirit, right? So if I'm happy, I'm upset, I'm excited, and whatever emotional or mental state I'm in, my body actually resonates with that. My body repeats whatever it is. It picks up that tone, that chord that Bruce Lee talked about. If that's true, then maybe the opposite is true as well. So that if I need to feel more flexible for the situation that I'm in, for the day that's ahead, maybe I get up and I do movements with my body that are fluid to me, that feel fluid, that feel like a water movement. And I use my body to influence my mind or spirit. Right? A certain posture strikes a resonant chord in spirit. A certain posture strikes a resonant chord in spirit. There are a lot of different influences and things that I've come across 5 realms. And just quickly, for those of you who haven't shared any time with me, I'll tell you that You go into Wikipedia and type in the 5 elements, and you're probably going to get way more than you ever want to read. You could actually type in fire element and probably get way more than you want to know about fire. And not just the physical thing fire, but how cultures and people over time and different thought paradigms and science and religion think about fire or water or air or earth or space, right? Those 5 elements. But one of the things I'll tell you is that even though we see that it shows up across many different trains of thought, across time, across people, those 5 elements, one of them that I really like that sort of speaks about the 5 elements very succinctly for me, calls to me, is Miyamoto Musashi. Miyamoto Musashi was a 16th century samurai. He wrote the Book of 5 Rings, which lives with us today. Many of you are shaking your heads because you've come across this. Oh, here it is right there. Arjun, he's one of my longtime students. He decided to bring the book today. Book of 5 Rings. But I think the English translation of that title is a bit off, actually. So I've read several different versions of it. I've read about various books about Musashi. You know what I get excited about? I call Mushim up one time. I say, hey, I found this other book about Musashi. It's great. You should I'll buy you a copy. Here it comes. Like, that's what I get excited about. A new book about Musashi. His take on the 5 elements are that not only are they physical embodiments of what we see in the universe, but that everything in the universe is made up of those 5 elements. Not just the physical stuff. When he says everything, he means your mental state as well. So it's a little bit coded, but he talks about that in there. So when you look at the title, the Book of 5 Rings, I don't think that's necessarily the best translation in English for it. I think it should be more like the Book of 5 Realms. He's not talking about a 2-dimensional static concept or place like we might think of as a ring. But he's really I think more like bubble, right? A large bubble, a realm that you may enter. You may enter into a fiery state of mind. You may enter into a watery state of mind. How do these things work? So if I'm excited, it's direct movement. If I'm being receptive, taking a step back. I need some space for myself. Getting perspective, right? The standing version of air is the only one where we get a 360 degrees perspective. So the movement itself encourages vision and clarity. This is where I'll introduce maybe the idea of rooting to the ground. Rooting to the ground. What's interesting to me is that a lot of these movements are seen across different movement paradigms. So if you're in yoga, if you're in Tai Chi, if you're in dance, if you're in physical therapy, I add that one in because one time I had someone in physical therapy come and give me scientific names for all of them. I can't remember them, but she started naming them. Is that these are sort of archetypal movements to the human body. Just like we have archetypal stories. These movements tend to be similar across different paradigms, movement practices. And these individual movements will then help us engender the kind of realm, the kind of mindset that we want to be in. Now, here we are in 2017, in the fall, and there's some very interesting things going on in our society. And one of the things that Musashi talks about is infection. He talks about infection with your body. And he's not talking about disease or injury or anything like that. What he's talking about is basically vibration. So if you think of a drop of water, and then you see the vibrations that come from that drop of water, that's essentially what he's talking about, vibration. Passing along vibration. And infection, what he talks about is that a person can be in a certain state of mind, fiery, and you may be somewhere else. Say air, you're being creative, you got some project going on or something like that, and you're thinking mode. And you come upon this person who's fiery, and that fire then catches on you. That vibration of the fire is strong. Or you are really firm about what you need to do, so you're in an earth mode. You're solid. Right? Maybe you're at work and you're thinking, this is what I need to do. This is what the group needs to do. We've agreed on things. We've got a direction we're going. You're solid. And someone comes along and they're very thinking. It's air. And their creativity is enrapturing. And their ideas and their vision is enrapturing. But it's very far off of maybe what we were thinking of in terms of that solid plan, that earth plan we had a moment ago. And that person infects us with their air energy. So what is the 5 realms about? It's about understanding and deciding. So earlier Mushim said that she talked about habit energy. And she said mindfulness creates a choice. And that is what we're doing here with 5 realms with your body. It's creating choice. So if I walk through the world and a situation, the person, the environment itself pulls me toward an earth energy or fire or air, is that really the right state of mind to be in? Is that really what I'm choosing? Or am I being infected by the environment, by the other people there, by the momentum of the community? Is it really where I want to be? So space is the energy where we go into to look at where I really want to be. Do I really want to be in this fiery state of mind? Do I really want to be in this creative, imaginative space? On the face of it, it might sound really good. Yeah, it's always good to be creative and imaginative. But guess what? Not all the time, because then you don't do anything. Right? I love reading through Bruce Lee's stuff, and he talked about, you have to temper your creative and imaginative energy with that of doing. Getting something done. So it turns out that we each have probably a preferred state of being, a preferred element, right, that fits with your world perspective, your personality, your likes, your dislikes, something like that. So all that kind of is wrapped up into, it means that John likes to be an air. John likes to be creative, imaginative, to think things through. My mother had this saying about me from when I was in grade school. She used to say to me, you can think a thought every way it can be done. So that was my preferred energy at a young age. And then there's your default. What do you go to in a crisis? They're probably not the same. They might be, but probably not the same. What do you do in crisis? That's actually your default. Not the one you like the best, but the one that you go to in a crisis without really thinking and making a choice, right? Default. So if I'm in a crisis, I immediately go to water. So that's actually my default. Is trying to be flexible about something and change. I'm looking for ways to move around and get around it. How do we get to the goal? How do we change the goal? Right? So that's my nature in terms of default. My default element would be water. Being an air person, to sit and think and draw and talk. devise plans. Turns out the opposite of that energy causes me some challenges. It's difficult sometimes for me. And that would be earth. Earth. I want to think about, I could just dream up a whole book. But sitting down and writing one, oh, that's too much work. Right, so I have to work sometimes. I pay attention to that when my earth energy is needed, that I have to be very conscious and mindful about employing it. So how does this work in life? So I had a volunteer situation where I'm working with a group and trying to help, it's a youth organization, help some youth. And so the adults involved, lots of communication stuff going on. It's a large community. There's like, I think about 1,200 families involved in the organization. And there's a lot of cultural stuff that comes up. Communications, miscommunications, missed intentions. And so it requires me to sort of take a look at how I interact with people. So what sort of state of being is someone else? Are they in a fiery state of mind? Are they earth and they're set on their ideas and not willing to move? How do we flow and interact with other people? So as Mushim said, it's about creating choice. So I go to space and try to make an evaluation, determination for myself about what kind of energy I want to be in that's going to be most helpful. Do I want to be in the energy that is creative? Do I want to be flexible? Do I need, my energy and my fire? Do I need to connect with community? What is it that I need? We have this chart that we use. We call it the Concepts and Cosmos chart for 5 realms. So on this side, I stand up so people can see, is the concepts around what the 5 realms look like in terms of clarity, vision, fire, which would be initiative, action, all the other elements there, and how they intertwine. And on the other side, we just have some artistic symbols about how it shows up in the world, different religions and science and astrology and so forth. Right, so you take a look at these maybe during the breaks of a few of them. The idea is, again, which one do I need? Where am I choosing? And where am I being infected? Where am I being taken along? I was very interested in this story that Mushim told about Rabbi Diane. Right, I wrote that down correct, Rabbi Diane. Holding the space for the marchers who went to the protest march. And Rabbi Diane led a group of people who decided to stay along. This is holding the space. Holding the space. Even have a formal process for that. I mentioned earlier Reverend E and East Bay Church. There's a formal process around that. One person or two would sit in the back during a service and hold the space. Someone who's one of the ministers or someone who's in training for that do what's called holding the space. And certain intention for the time and the people that are communing together. And so that holding the space for Rabbi Dan, for the people at East Bay Church that do that, for you sitting at the side of the bed for someone who's sick or having a problem, you being there for a family member, a friend, a partner, listening, that's holding the space. So what's interesting is that we come here to talk about having space for ourselves. But one of the things I see that is really important in these times, and I just kind of briefly mentioned it at the start, is we're living in some very interesting times, is that we are holding space for others as well. We do need to hold space for ourselves. We do need to come here and do it day long. We do need to have those small moments where we adjust ourselves, those micro adjustments that Mushim was referring to early, either in body or mind and spirit, because that is the basis for which we are able to hold space for others. Very difficult to hold space for others in challenging times, whether they be global or just one-on-one with someone who needs you in that moment, if we're not holding space for ourselves. Very difficult. We need to make sure our batteries are charged. Right? We're so concerned about our phones. We're running out of juice. How many times a day you check your phone to see if the battery's running out? How many times? Right? But we'll go maybe days, weeks, months, sometimes years without checking our internal batteries. But we do that. Yeah, that's what we're doing today, right? So we are doing it. We are doing it. So I'm just suggesting, maybe check your internal battery at least one more time than you check your phone. Right? So, there's a lot I could say, but I want to leave you with this one other quote that I just think is appropriate for what we're doing here today and the times. And it's this concept from the Tao Te Ching, another book that's been with us much longer than 5 Realms. Tao Te Ching, I found out, is the most printed book in the world. 81 verses, it's very short, built on Taoist thought, comes to us from China, and it's the Tao Te Ching, one of those short and sweet 81 verses, talks about emptiness. And so it says, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it says, you have 4 walls and a roof for a room, but it's the empty space in the middle that makes the room usable. And so therefore the intangible gives the tangible usefulness. Right? It's the intangible that gives the tangible its usefulness. It's the empty space in the middle of the room that makes the room usable. The tangible is the 4 walls and the roof. But if we don't have any empty space, the room is not really usable. I'll give you one more thing. This is very difficult, I think, sometimes when we're looking at the infection that is within our government right now. Different types of infection. And we can see that it is vibrating out, not only to all corners of this country, but abroad. I'm not speaking of one person. I'm not speaking of one political party. I'm speaking of how we are as a country right now. How we are as a country right now. Not one person. And how we are, in some corners, has some really strong vibrations. And so we want to be mindful of how those vibrations may affect us that come from outside of ourselves. And we may want to be mindful of what vibrations we can create to create the kind of environment that we want to be in. So in my community, 1,200 families, serving youth, there's so many parallels that I can see to what's going on in our politics, to how we have been interacting with each other. And I can see the infection. And sometimes I fall into it myself, and I try to come back and say to myself first that speaking to another person out of compassion, no matter what their views or ideas are, is really what I want to do. It doesn't matter if they deserve it or not, or if I agree or not. but how I conduct my conversation, my actions. I try to create a vibration that's one of inclusivity, compassion, to try to further and elevate the discussion that we're having. And this is even when, there's 2 or 3 groups. People who sort of agree with each other will be on fire. Well, we gotta really light them up. Don't you agree? Well, I think you're right, but I don't know that setting them on fire is the right thing to do. It might be. Sometimes you gotta set something on fire. I'm speaking metaphorically. Don't go out here and set fire to a building and said, Master Ellis said. No, that's not what I mean. But we look in nature and we see how the elements are instructive to us. I mean, because it takes a fire of 125 degrees to open up the pine cone of a redwood tree. And so those natural forest fires that we were so afraid of for so many years, turns out planet Earth knew what it was doing. That's how you get those cones open for new. You got to clear out the underbrush first. Natural fires, right, from lightning. Got to get rid of some stuff first. Also has to be hot enough to open up the cone for the seeds to come out, and then new growth can happen. So sometimes, fire helps. But we come back to, as I end, and we'll have time for a couple of questions now. Bruce Lee's quote. Right? This is, I think, the best quote that really embodies what Five Realms practice is about. How it can be used as a tool. A certain posture creates a resonant chord in your spirit. Okay? Thank you. So now we have time for a few questions.
I can take this one around, Master Ellis.
That's a good time for questions or comments. How's your body feeling?
Could you talk a little bit about the concepts that go with each realm, with each element?
Sure. So that's what we have on this chart, right, is the concepts. This is the concept side of the chart. And so for fire, we can just kind of walk through this together, right, while I answer the question. Fire is what? Just put your hands out. How does fire go? Right, it's direct, right? Direct movement. It doesn't necessarily have to be that particular movement, but any forward direct movement. Fire engenders within us action, excitement, right? Passion, courage, initiative. All those things are fire energies. What did I say while we're moving? I said receive from fire. So the idea actually is that whatever the element is, whatever the state of mind that we're in, too often we make a choice about the right one to be in, but we stay there. So we go into fire, and then we stay in fire, and stay in fire, and stay in fire, and stay in fire. Excited, committed, passionate. And then eventually we get what? Burned out. Why? Because we did not receive. And go back to center. So you come out of the element, and you go back to center. Center is space. So there's actually little space in between each of the elements, even in the physical practice that we just did. And then, so fire is initiative in action. And as I walked through them and I was talking, as we were doing it a couple of times, I said that water was flexibility, flow, compassion, receptivity. I said that space, right? Space, the central energy we go to figure out which one we want to use. Space is harmony, balance, spirituality, alpha, omega, everything, nothing. One mistake that we tend to make in Western minds is that we think of it in solid, fixed terms. Space, like yin and yang, is not male, female, for example. It is masculine and feminine. They're qualities that both are employed in each other. It's up and down. So you can go so far up and then eventually you're down. So far to the left, eventually you come back to the right. So they're supposed to be complementary energies. That's why the main one is harmony and balance. And then we have air, different versions of air, clarity, vision, perspective, joy, imagination, thought. And then we had earth. I have two friends with their earth shirts on today. Earth is connection, community, strength, stability, manifestation. And again, for all those, right, you go into it, and then you receive, and go back to center. And so for earth, for example, the difficulty of staying in an energy, the example for that one, as I did for fire, would be if you go into earth and you stay there, what happens? You get stuck. Right? And then we think about our language. So all the elemental ideas are already in our language. If it's something you want to do and you're in earth energy, you can't quite figure your way out through it or out of it, you're stuck. If it's somebody else who's standing their ground, they're stubborn. Right? So again, we kind of look at how we interact with people with these things. And it may be the opposite. It may be that we're a little harder on ourselves than we are other people. So maybe you are stuck, but I'm stubborn. It depends on the person, right? I may be a little harder on myself than I am other people. But it's in our language. Being flexible, right? If you're too flexible, what happens? Had it up to here. I'm drowning, indecisive, underwater. It's all in our language already. Okay, anything else? Last one maybe?
Mine is an observation that is a question, which is I noticed as I was standing and going through the movements that I had a hard time being in my body. When my eyes are closed, it's like I can find it and I know what's going on. But when I have my eyes open, especially when other people are doing it around me, I get lost. And I don't know if that's a practice I could do to help me have my eyes open and be grounded. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, a lot. And I'll just say briefly, Mushim and I have lots of conversations about this. We just had a conversation about this not long ago, where, I think even lunch we were talking about it too. It's part of my set of soapbox things that I can talk for hours about. Just that we're so competitive in our society and we're so also bent on production that we lost a lot of the value of just being and playing. And so whether we realize it or not, in many cases, I'm not saying yours, but I'm just saying what this makes me think of, right, is that we're disembodied because we're not pro athletes, we're not producing something, we're not on that triathlon, we're not as good as the person next to us, we're making value judgments about that. And I would suspect that might be somewhere near the case, because if you say you close your eyes and you're there, but when you open your eyes, it's more difficult. I feel like I've had that kind of experience. That's why Mushim really encourages me to tell the origin story a lot. Sometimes in the beginning, I didn't used to tell that story. I just kind of skip over it and really see the significance of it. But really it's about that, I'm not able to do what I was able to do before. I have this goal of getting back to what I wanted to do. I can't do as much as my peers, right? All that for years I was dealing with that and trying to work my way through that. And so, again, where my physical practice and Buddhist principles really align is around what do you have in the moment and releasing all those expectations, right? I would just encourage you to keep doing it with your eyes closed then. That's okay. And one day you might open your eyes and do it, and it's fine. You know, tomorrow, a month from now, it doesn't matter. If where you feel good doing it, I just say be safe. You know, really make sure you get stuff off the ground around you, right? And you take really small movements in that case, but maybe you do it sitting or reclining with your eyes closed, and let that be your guide, right? That's communication and to me, what I hear is that you're communicating with your body, and your body says, close your eyes. That's what I hear. Not that there's some deficiency when your eyes are open. What I hear is your body wants a path where there's a lot more space. And you cut off your vision, you cut off a lot of different parts of the brain just by closing your eyes. And then you can really sink down into your body. That's what I hear.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. Last one. Then we're going to do some walking meditation. Last one.
Hey, this on?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, I was wondering about something about pivoting between elements while you're just kind of going through your day-to-day. And I guess maybe some people can kind of pivot between elements less smoothly than others, and then some can kind of do it at the drop of a dime, or just whenever they feel like it at will. And the sense of momentum of pivoting between the elements is kind of more within like immediate choice or immediate like will for others, and then for others it's not as much. I was wondering if you knew if there was like any way to kind of harness that level of I guess play, interweaving, just that level of control over the elements with the way that you function.
Yes. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I've talked about a couple of times before. And what I'm learning today from you, I told you I love coming to this because I get good questions, I learn things, is the word that you use to me that I'm going to start using is the word pivot. Because that's actually my traditional martial arts practice. We're doing things, we say pivot left, pivot right. But when we talk about, when your question though was about how do we use those elements walking through our day, and how do we pivot from element to element. So when we go, the way that this is constructed, so I go into an energy, I recede from an energy, and I go back to center. Center is another word for space. Initially I don't say that just because I don't want to confuse people about which one is fire, earth, and so forth, right? But really going back to center, we're in a space posture in between each element. And then I go to the next element. And coming back to that space, that center between them, is a representation of how we may go throughout our days. So if I got to wake up, I got 3-4 meetings at work, I got to be in fire. And then I need to come back to center. I need to center myself. I need to recede. I need to consciously come out of that. Because then I got to go to lunch with my oldest, dearest friend, right? And then I'm earth, right? So one of my oldest, dearest friends, Terrence, lives around here. We went to high school in Texas together. And I would be in so much fire all the time when he would see me. So I got 3 boys. And I'm like, that I was doing that with him. And one time he said, hey, hold up now. Come on, take it down a notch. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Right? I didn't pivot when I saw him. I was still communicating and talking in the same way in which I was. That was the right, tool for the moment when you got 3 boys trying to, kill each other, basically. I'll just be plain about it. And I'm the referee. So we pivot. And then I go from lunch to a school meeting for the kids, right? Do I need to be in fire? No. With the teachers and the administrators, do I need to be in earth? No. I need to be listening. I need to be taking it in. Again, another pivot. So as we walk through the day and be able to do those different things is really important. It may take some practice, right? It's a different set of goggles we put on, our glasses, my 5 realms glasses. Oh, I can see that you're on fire. I can see that person's in water. Where do I need to be? How do we interact together? If that person's in fire, one of the biggest things that happens is, these conceptual things are not so hard to understand or to figure out or to decide on if we think about them in the physical world. So if somebody's being really fiery, and we're having an argument, what do we normally do? We get fiery back. But if there's a fire that started over here, would we go get some matches or blow torches? Right? That's not the solution. You get rid of the fuel, or you take away the air out of the argument, right? And then the fire dies down. Or you use water to put on, but you don't go put more fire on the fire. I had a conversation with someone, and I was saying that grasping at too tightly at one of those energies, if you think of water, and I really am gonna be flexible today. But if you did that in the real world, right? And you fill the sink up with water, and I'm really gonna grasp that water, it doesn't work. It just slips through your fingers, right? I'm really gonna grasp that fire. It's hard to hold on to that. We think of grains of sand, dirt, right? It slips through your fingers. I'm really gonna get air down. And so coming in and out of how we enter something, that those 3 breaths are about being mindful. And I would just encourage you to think about entering and receiving from them mindfully, versus I'm really gonna do this. I've got to get it down and produce with those energies. Right? How we enter them and how we receive from them is really important, right? To use them as tools.
And I can't resist adding on that it's been remarked upon by some Asian Buddhist meditation masters that, again, because of, capitalism, productivity, and everything, that some people in the West can tend to make meditation into a thing. And and then that has problems consequent to it, as a thing. And one, I think it was Tibetan Buddhist meditation master said, what's this thing about people in the United States telling me I meditate every morning for 20 minutes, and then I meditate 20 minutes at night. He said, what is this thing about 20 minutes? So meditation, like anything else, can become kind of commodified, or can become like a thing. And that's really something to look at in our practice.
As a parent now of 3 boys, and at a martial arts school, martial arts teacher, I have a relationship with lots of kids. And I take them as young as 3. So I see them sometimes 2 siblings come in, not long after birth. But particularly with my own 3, I resonate with your thought that we come here with something already. I got one boy who's definitely born in fire. Right? I got one who's definitely born in air. They came that way. Before they could talk, you could tell. Yeah. That resonates with me.
And I wanted to piggyback on that too, because I tried to be a very good parent. I have a son who's now 28, and and I'm Buddhist also. So we were walking along one day when he was around 4 and a half, and he said, Mom, why don't you want me to do weapons play? And so, I said in this very proper manner, I said, well, I've read a lot of articles about parenting, and the research seems to indicate that children who do weapons play may grow up to become more aggressive adults. And he said, I am aggressive. speak. That's exactly what you're saying. He just said, this, I am aggressive. And I thought, all right. That's the way you are.
One of the things I learned early on is we're not, I'm not trying to give the idea that, one's better than the other. We have all these things within us, and that we learn to choose them. We may have something that we're strong at, and like for me, I have to work harder to get at earth. Right? I was just joking about that with one of my buddies earlier about the 5 Realms program, how I had to get the certification for it. It took a long time, because that's the earth that I have to write everything down. Right? But if you're born in fire, you're a fire person. My youngest, Nalen, or my oldest, Sahas, he's a space person. He needs a lot of space. Way more space than I need. And I think I'm a person who needs a fair amount of space, but he needs more than me. And I wonder, like, why does it take you so long to recuperate from doing something? But that's his nature, right? That we don't squash that, we just add. And we learn to make choices so that we're not carried along by circumstances or other people. But we can celebrate our fire nature, our air nature, our earth, water nature, space nature.
So we do want to hear if you've had any ideas about things you can do to create more space in your body and in your life. Follow up, continuation is really, really important. If there are any even small things that have occurred to you. And I'm thinking about how at one point I had a pinched nerve, so I went to physical therapy at Oakland Kaiser, and I had this really great physical therapist. His name was Brian Wong. And so he gave me like foam roller things to do, and I really got better. And so finally I went to see him, and he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Brian, I think I'm back." About 95, 98%. He said, "That's good enough for me. You don't have to return." And then he stared at me and he said, "Here's what you need to do." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You must sear the memory of that pain into every cell of your body." And I thought, why? And he said, because what happens is people come, they do the exercises, they start feeling better, they leave, and then they don't do the exercises. And then I see them back here. He said, "I don't want to see you back here. I want to see you remain pain-free." And he was so effective as a teacher that I just got my foam roller and I went home and I would just think of him. He didn't even have any humor in his eyes. It was just like, he said, "This is what you need to do." So we come here and it's great, and then one or two little things you could do to create more space in your body or your life?
One of the things that we'll think about in the regular practice class at the studio is the 5 elements of what you do with your body. So your breathing is your air, how you give exercise to your body, your fire, what you eat is your earth, what you drink is your water. Right? And then the rest that you have, both awake and asleep, rest. A lot of times we think of rest as just being, at the end of the day when you pass out, but the rest that you need throughout the day as your space. So we look at 5 elements in terms of many different ways, many different levels. One of the things that folks will ask me about is the hand movements. And again, this movement here is to help lead your body, or rather your body's leading your mind, right? And taking full breaths and exhaling fully. Because breaths tend to be shallow sometimes. And you breathe. One of the first things we do in martial arts practice is talk about your breath being at your throat. It's panting. And then sometimes we can get our breath down to about mid-chest or so. Heaving. But breathing really is down here. So you should feel your abdomen expand. And when you exhale, a little tightness there to get all your breath out. You get a full breath. So this hand motion is to help your mind remember that. Right?
So I think about now how I can be more intentional about travel, and how to use my energy there. And this is definitely a practice I can easily take with me, to be intentional about what's going on in all of those realms, definitely from eating, and resting is a big one. This could be when you're changing time zones and you're worried about being on point. You may not sleep the way you usually sleep, right? So what are the other ways to rest other than sleeping? Is something I've been actually thinking about lately, because sleep is not always accessible. And it also for me comes from, I think this was back in April, there was a performance art piece done here around Black women resting, and how that's a political statement as well as a mental health and all of that, and their patron saint was, gosh, I can't remember, her name is Harriet Tubman. And how she had narcolepsy, and she said when she went to sleep, she got her strategy. And like how we need our sleep and our rest to do the work, to be strong enough to be present, to think of what we need to do, to be intentional.
I'm going to invite Mushim, bow to that. And I'm going to invite Mushim to say something about the vow, not burning out.
Yes.
And before that, I just want to mention that the sitting version of Five Realms came to me because of travel. And it was, I had a hard time sitting. At the time I was going on flights to Chicago and back for work a lot, and sitting, the flight is 3.5 hours plus, another couple hours on either end of that, just really was physically painful. And so it was that travel that got me to develop a sitting version of it. I call it the Southwest version, Southwest Airlines. Although the movements have to be even smaller, right? Follow right here.
Yeah, when you first started teaching it, you called it the
Southwest version.
Southwest
Airlines.
Southwest Airlines.
And I know we have another
5
person,
rounds.
but can you say something about the vow
Sure.
burning out?
Yeah. So thank you so much for that. I have to say, for my own practice, exactly the same. Because I tend to be a pretty determined, purposeful person, and then I wasn't getting enough rest during the day. And I do sleep well at night, so that's good, but I just get so worn down, and I can't drink caffeine anymore, so. Yeah, I know, it became a desperate situation. And so, it was actually through being a student of yoga and doing that shavasana at the end that I learned that I could be in a state where I was really deeply relaxed and extremely alert. I wasn't going to sleep, I wasn't even near to going to sleep. I was feeling all the sensations, and I was just letting everything relax. And I thought, I need to transfer this into more parts of my day, and I have been, and it's totally made a difference to me, so thank you for bringing that up. What Master Ellis was referring to is, you can Google this if you like. So my name is Mushim, M-U-S-H-I-M. It's my Buddhist name. And if you Google vow not to burn out, you will find an essay that I wrote for Buddha Dharma magazine, which is one of the major Buddhist media in North America. It was published last year, and it went viral. And so it's based on a vow which I put together for the year-long program here, Practice in Transformative Action, which is mindfulness for social justice activists and agents of change. Chris is a graduate of Ikeda, and I'm just getting ready to start my 5th cohort in September. And so I begin by offering everyone there is a social justice activist. People are often either in burnout or on the edge of burnout, or they've known people who've burned out, and I offer them the vow, which is, you can find online again, which is something like, aware of suffering and injustice in the world, I put in your name, Mushim, vow to practice, mindfulness, joy, healing, and rest in order to be able to help myself and others, to affect the change that we want to see. And then it ends with, I vow to not burn out. And it's an open thing. Some people actually will not sign it, which is interesting. Yeah. They'll say, I can't in all conscience really say that I'm committing to not burning out. And that's something interesting to look at, right? Yeah, and that's an honest statement. Like, I'm going so fast with so much force and speed, I actually cannot commit. I can't take this vow now. I'll say that's fine. It's just for you to consider. So some people will keep it for a full year, and at the end of the year they'll say, now I'm ready, and this is a real commitment in my life. I recently got an email through my website from a family in Australia. It was 2 parents, an 8-year-old kid, and then there was a baby in utero. And the whole family said they read this article and they decided they were all going to take the vow, including the 8-year-old kid, every week. Because kids have very stressful lives. They do. They do. So, that's another thing. Are we actually promising to take care of ourselves so that we don't burn out? Burnout has very severe consequences. It is not something to laugh at all. People will actually die from burnout who are in liberation movements.
Okay.
And Master Ellis, can people reach you through this email?
Through this email right here, the PayPal email.
Amanda Martial Arts.
You can reach me through that. And then on your certificates, it's got another email address. It's 5realmsoflife@gmail. So either one of those are good. Okay, so that's the studio and the normal classes that we have. Folks like Mushim and this guy back there, Arjuna, have been asking me for a while to do something that I finally got done. Took me a little while, but something I finally got done. So there's a student handbook now for 5 realms. Right? I had to employ my earth energies. Be very purposeful. So this manual kind of helps you go through a lot of the deeper stuff. There's even more stuff, even with just the first form. And by the way, there's another form too that we practice, a second form that's a little bit more challenging. And it's got sort of 3 versions of that. And you learn how someone asked me the question, I kind of answered a little bit now. We go through the form, that standing form or sitting or reclining. You can do that in shallow, neutral, or deep, right? Which is what we did today. But you can also do it, the entire thing in one element. And that means to do the whole form with a sense of air. To do the whole form with a sense of fluidity in water. To do the whole form in fire, and so forth, right? So there's other methods that we use to sort of give us more tools. And then also we have 3 major ways of doing the form with that as well. So we do it in, the first one would be cultivating the breath. And that's doing one movement and doing it and breathing through it. So I would hold like my fire movement. I would stay there. I wouldn't come back right away. And take a predetermined number of breaths, maybe 8 breaths. And then go to the next movement and stay there and take 8 breaths. So that's cultivating the breath. And then the next one is called drumming the chi. And I might just go in and out of water. So I did that with one person today. We just went through water when I was having an individual conversation. Just do water, because I need a lot of water energy in that conversation. So I just do water over and over. And then go to the next movement. And then there's one called piercing the veil. That one has sharp movements. And that one is more akin to what maybe people see as martial arts moves. But so we do it in those 3 ones. So there's a lot of different stuff. We have readings and stuff that you got to do. So so we have this. If you're interested in learning the details, then come to the studio. Now let me say this for you who came today, and I may never see you again. As Yoda said, you must unlearn what you have learned. You must unlearn what you have learned. It's quite okay if you walk away from here and you go, I can't remember the exact, which one goes first, second, third, or the exact movement. That's not really what I want you to get today, but I want you to get move your body in a fiery way for you, right? To move your mindset to step into the realm of fire if you need that, or water, or whatever. It doesn't have to be the exact movement that you practice today. But what does your body tell you? So I really want you to get the communication and communion part, more so than the details of the steps and exactly where your foot goes and your hand goes. Now, if you come to the studio, that's good. We'll get that, right? With some continued practice. So, this is actually the first time I'm announcing that the student handbook is done outside of my own studio. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
all right, so we're just going to give you a last reminder about Donna and how the organization, how the EBMC exists and pays its bills, as well as the teacher, Donna, for the teachers. And we think, okay, so thank you so much. Thank you so much.